a quiet welcome to Restful Historian. Today, our journey carries us away from the shadowed landscapes of medieval Europe and towards the sun-drenched shores of the Aegean Sea, to a civilization whose brilliance ignited a flame that continues to illuminate our modern world. We embark upon a vast, tranquil, and deeply immersive exploration of ancient Greek civilization. Here, amidst the rugged mountains and the sapphire waters, we will seek to understand the very origins of Western thought, the birth of democracy, the flourishing of philosophy, the timeless beauty of art, and the intricate tapestry of myth and legend that shaped a people. In this video, we will wander through the ruins of ancient cities, listen to the echoes of their thinkers and heroes, and contemplate the genesis of ideas that, even millennia later, resonate profoundly within our own societies. So, find your comfortable space, let your mind drift, and let's ease into tonight's story together. Chapter 1. The Aegean Tapestry, Precursors to Hellenic Dawn. Our journey begins, perhaps counterintuitively, not on the Greek mainland, but on the large, fertile island of Crete, approximately 2 millennia before the Common Era. Here, a sophisticated and enigmatic civilization, now known as the Minoan culture, blossomed from around 2700 to 1450 BCE. It was brought to light, astonishingly, by the pioneering excavations of Sir Arthur Evans in the early 20th century. Imagine a British archaeologist, driven by an insatiable curiosity, patiently uncovering the sprawling ruins of a vast complex near the modern city of Heraklion. What he found there, beneath centuries of earth, was a revelation: the legendary palace of Knossos, the heart of a civilization utterly distinct from what was then known of early Greece. The Minoan civilization was profoundly shaped by its island geography and its intimate relationship with the sea. Surrounded by the nurturing embrace of the Mediterranean, the Minoans became master mariners, fearless explorers, and shrewd traders. Their ships, laden with Cretan olive oil, wine, exquisitely crafted pottery, and timber, crisscrossed the Aegean, establishing a vast and prosperous maritime network that stretched from Egypt and the Levant to the Cycladic Islands and the Greek mainland. This extensive trade brought not only wealth but also a rich influx of ideas, materials, and artistic influences, contributing to the distinct cosmopolitan flavor of Minoan culture. Imagine their elegant, swift ships, with their single sails and numerous oars, gliding silently across the azure waters, connecting distant lands and facilitating an unprecedented exchange of goods and cultural practices. The most striking testament to Minoan civilization is undoubtedly their remarkable palatial architecture. Unlike the fortified citadels of later mainland Greece, Minoan palaces like Knossos, Phaistos, and Malia were unfortified, sprawling complexes, seemingly designed more for comfort, administration, and ritual than for defense. Knossos, in particular, was a labyrinthine wonder, a multi-storied marvel with complex drainage systems, light wells, and vast central courtyards that could accommodate large public gatherings or spectacular rituals. Imagine wandering through its numerous rooms, ascending and descending its grand staircases, glimpsing at vibrant frescoes on the walls. These palaces were not merely royal residences, they were sophisticated administrative centers, vast storehouses, religious sanctuaries, and artistic workshops, functioning as the economic and social hubs of their respective regions. The very absence of imposing defensive walls suggests a society that felt secure, perhaps protected by its insular geography and the undisputed might of its navy, hinting at an era of relative peace and prosperity. Minoan art is perhaps its most famous and evocative legacy, renowned for its vibrant colors, dynamic forms, and an almost unparalleled sense of fluidity and naturalism. Unlike the rigid, stylized art of contemporary Egypt or Mesopotamia, Minoan frescoes and pottery burst with life. Imagine gazing upon frescoes depicting graceful dolphins leaping through turquoise waters, slender youths performing daring feats of bull leaping in grand arenas, or elegant court ladies adorned with elaborate hairstyles and rich jewelry. These artistic expressions reveal a deep appreciation for nature, a joy in movement, and a society that, at least in its idealized portrayal, was characterized by elegance, grace, and perhaps a more prominent role for women than in many other ancient cultures. Their pottery, too, was innovative, featuring delicate eggshell ware and vibrant marine motifs. The Minoans also developed a unique system of writing, known as Linear A, discovered on clay tablets during archaeological excavations. Linear A remains, to this day, largely undeciphered. Imagine the frustration and tantalizing mystery of these inscribed tablets, hinting at administrative records, economic transactions, and perhaps even religious texts, yet stubbornly refusing to yield their secrets to modern scholarship. This undeciphered script is a poignant reminder of the gaps in our understanding, a silent barrier between our world and the inner workings of their minds. Their religion appears to have centered around a great mother goddess, often associated with fertility, nature, and perhaps the earth itself. Evidence suggests reverence for sacred trees, pillars, and animals, particularly the bull. Unlike later Greek practices, there is an absence of large, dedicated temples. Instead, religious rituals seem to have taken place in sacred caves, peak sanctuaries on mountains, or within designated rooms in the palaces. Imagine quiet processions to a mountaintop shrine, offering prayers to a powerful, benevolent deity whose presence was felt in the earth's bounty and the sea's abundance. The decline of the Minoan civilization, around 1450 BC, remains a subject of scholarly debate, likely a confluence of factors. One prominent theory points to the catastrophic volcanic eruption of Thera, modern Santorini, a neighboring island, which occurred around 1600 BCE. While not immediately destroying Crete, the immense tsunami and ashfall could have significantly damaged Minoan naval power, agricultural lands, and trade networks, weakening the civilization. However, archaeological evidence also suggests that Minoan palaces, including Knossos, show signs of violent destruction around 1450 BCE, coinciding with the rise of a new power on the Greek mainland, the Mycenaeans. It is widely believed that these more militaristic mainlanders, who had long been influenced by Minoan culture, eventually conquered Crete, bringing an end to the independent Minoan era. As the Minoan star began to wane, a new and distinct civilization had already been flourishing on the Greek mainland, one that would eventually dominate the Aegean and absorb much of Minoan influence, the Mycenaeans. Flourishing from approximately 1600 to 1100 BCE, the Mycenaean civilization derives its name from one of its most prominent sites, Mycenae, located in the rugged Argolid region of the Peloponnese. It was here that the flamboyant German archaeologist Heinrich Schliemann, famously driven by a fervent belief in the literal truth of Homer's epics, began his excavations in the late 19th century, uncovering the staggering wealth and formidable fortresses of a long-lost Bronze Age kingdom. In stark contrast to the open, unfortified Minoan palaces, the defining characteristic of Mycenaean sites was their massive fortifications. Imagine arriving at Mycenae, Tiryns, or Pylos, and being confronted by colossal walls constructed of enormous, roughly hewn stones, so massive that later Greeks attributed their construction to the mythical Cyclopes, hence the term Cyclopean masonry. These formidable walls, often over 6 meters thick and towering even higher, speak volumes about the nature of Mycenaean society. It was a world of powerful, independent warrior kings, frequently engaged in conflict or certainly prepared for it. Each site was effectively a self-sufficient citadel, dominating its surrounding territory. Within these imposing fortresses stood the Megaron, a large rectangular hall with a central hearth and 4 columns supporting a roof with an opening for smoke. This architectural feature was not merely a ceremonial space, it was the heart of the Mycenaean palace, serving as the throne room, audience chamber, and the symbolic center of the king's authority. Its design would later subtly influence the layout of early Greek temples. Mycenaean society was distinctly militaristic and hierarchical. Archaeological finds reveal a fascination with warfare, evident in the numerous bronze weapons, elaborate helmets, and depictions of warriors in their art. The rulers, powerful chieftains known as wanaxes, a title that would later evolve into anax or lord in Homeric epics, commanded a warrior elite, supported by a vast administrative bureaucracy. The discovery of rich shaft graves and monumental though lost tombs, beehive-shaped burial chambers, at Mycenae, replete with gold death masks, like the famous Mask of Agamemnon, though it predates the legendary king, intricate jewelry and weapons, provides astonishing evidence of the immense wealth, social stratification, and elaborate burial practices of these warrior kings. Imagine the sheer opulence buried with these ancient rulers, reflecting their power and the belief in a rich afterlife. Crucially, the Mycenaeans adopted and adapted the Minoan writing system, transforming Linear A into Linear B. Unlike Linear A, Linear B was famously deciphered in the 1950s by Michael Ventris and John Chadwick. Their groundbreaking work revealed that Linear B was an early form of Greek, making the Mycenaeans the first recorded speakers of the Greek language. Imagine the thrill of this discovery, suddenly allowing scholars to read thousands of clay tablets unearthed at various Mycenaean sites. These tablets, however, were not literary works or historical narratives. They were overwhelmingly administrative records, inventories of goods, lists of tribute, detailed accounts of agricultural produce, and records of military personnel. They provide an invaluable, if dry, snapshot of the bureaucratic workings of the Mycenaean palace economy, detailing the precise organization of their highly centralized states. Like the Minoans, the Mycenaeans were also active in trade, but their expansion often had a more aggressive, perhaps even predatory, character. They established trading posts and outposts throughout the Aegean, southern Italy, and beyond, seeking valuable raw materials and markets for their own manufactured goods. Their presence in the eastern Mediterranean is well documented, hinting at a broader influence than just economic exchange. Indeed, many scholars now believe that the Mycenaeans were the historical kernel behind the legendary Greek campaigns, including the Trojan War, recounted in Homer's Iliad and Odyssey. While the epics themselves are later literary creations, the archaeological evidence of large, unified Mycenaean campaigns against Anatolian settlements lends a compelling historical context to the heroic sagas. In terms of religion, the Mycenaeans worshipped a pantheon of gods and goddesses whose names bear striking resemblances to the later Olympian deities. Tablets refer to Diwe, Zeus, Poseidaio, Poseidon, Hera, Hera, and Tyranny, Poteni, Mistress Athena. This suggests that many of the gods familiar from classical Greek mythology had their origins, at least in name and perhaps some attributes, in the Bronze Age Mycenaean world, linking the archaic past to the future spiritual landscape. The eventual decline and collapse of the Mycenaean civilization around 1200 to 1100 BCE marks the end of the Bronze Age in Greece and the beginning of the perplexing Greek Dark Ages. This collapse was widespread, affecting not only Mycenaean strongholds but also other major Bronze Age powers across the eastern Mediterranean. The causes are complex and still debated, likely involving a combination of factors such as internet strife and warfare, systemic economic collapse, environmental factors, and invasions. Imagine the sudden, chilling silence that must have fallen over these mighty fortresses. Their walls, once impregnable, now stood sentinel over deserted halls. The complex administrative system documented in Linear B tablets vanished, and literacy itself was lost for several centuries. The vibrant Bronze Age came to an abrupt, mysterious end, plunging Greece into what is conventionally known as the Dark Ages. And so, dear listener, our journey through the Aegean Tapestry reveals two distinct yet interconnected civilizations. The Minoans, a thalassocracy of peaceful traders and elegant artists, who laid the groundwork for maritime prowess and sophisticated administration. And the Mycenaeans, a martial society of powerful warrior kings, whose imposing fortresses and early Greek language established a direct lineage to the classical Hellenic world, and whose eventual collapse left a void that would profoundly shape the centuries to come. Their story, both vibrant and enigmatic, is the essential prelude to the dawn of classical Greece. Chapter 2: The Dark Ages and Emergence of the Polis. Our journey now brings us to one of the most enigmatic and transformative periods in Greek history, the Greek Dark Ages. This era, stretching roughly from the collapse of the Mycenaean civilization around 1100 BCE to the dawn of the Archaic period around 800 BCE, is so named not for a lack of human activity, but for a frustrating scarcity of archaeological evidence and, crucially, a near-total absence of written records. Imagine a curtain falling suddenly upon the bustling, literate world of the Mycenaean palaces, plunging the Aegean into a period of relative silence, a void in our understanding. The causes of the Mycenaean collapse, as we touched upon, were complex, likely a calamitous combination of internal strife, environmental stresses, and devastating external pressures from the enigmatic sea peoples and perhaps other migrating groups. The immediate aftermath was one of widespread depopulation and deurbanization. Imagine the majestic, fortified Mycenaean citadels, once teeming with life, slowly becoming deserted, their massive cyclopean walls standing as silent monuments to a vanished glory. Populations plummeted, and people largely abandoned the large, centralized palace centers, dispersing into smaller, more isolated settlements. With the collapse of the highly centralized palatial economy, the intricate networks of trade and administration that had characterized the Bronze Age fragmented. The sophisticated bureaucracy that maintained records in linear B vanished, and with it, literacy itself was lost for several centuries. Imagine a world where the ability to read and write, once a specialized but vital skill, simply ceased to exist for generations, replaced by an oral tradition. This loss of literacy is a primary reason why this period feels dark to us. The written voices of the past are silent. Material culture also underwent a significant decline. Life became simpler, more rural, and generally poorer. The impressive craftsmanship in gold, bronze, and ivory that defined Mycenaean art largely disappeared. Imagine a people stripped of the grand luxuries and complex organization of their ancestors, forced to live a more subsistence-based existence, focused purely on survival. This was a challenging period, marked by fragmentation and relative isolation. Yet, even in this era of decline, the seeds of a new world were being quietly sown. Though knowledge of bronze working diminished, a crucial new technology, iron metallurgy, slowly began to take hold. Iron, while more difficult to work than bronze initially, was far more abundant and widely distributed throughout Greece. Imagine village smiths painstakingly learning to forge this harder, more durable metal into tools and weapons. This shift from the Bronze Age to the Iron Age meant that ordinary farmers and villagers could now afford better agricultural implements and more effective weapons for defense, contributing to a slow but vital rebuilding of basic capabilities and providing a new foundation for economic life. As the centuries progressed, there was a gradual, yet profound, slow recovery and population rebound. Small settlements began to coalesce, and basic forms of trade gradually re-emerged, connecting isolated communities. Though still decentralized and far from the grandeur of the Mycenaean era, these scattered communities harbored the enduring spirit of the Greek people, slowly laying the groundwork for a new cultural flourishing. A truly pivotal moment in this recovery, and a crucial bridge to the Archaic period, came with the reintroduction of literacy to the Greek world, largely through contact with the Phoenicians. Imagine the Phoenicians, a maritime trading people from the eastern Mediterranean, modern-day Lebanon, whose ships tirelessly plied the waters, connecting distant lands and facilitating the exchange of goods and, crucially, ideas. From around the 9th century BCE, the Greeks, through their renewed interaction with these astute traders, encountered the Phoenician alphabet. This revolutionary writing system was not a complex syllabary like Linear B, but a simple, phonetic alphabet with a limited number of distinct symbols, each representing a single sound. Imagine the profound impact of this innovation. The Greeks adopted and adapted the Phoenician alphabet, crucially adding vowels, which the Semitic Phoenician script lacked, to create the first true phonetic alphabet, making it incredibly versatile and relatively easy to learn. This was a game changer. It democratized literacy, moving it from the exclusive domain of palace scribes to potentially anyone who could master its simple characters. This reintroduction of writing, after centuries of illiteracy, was like a light being kindled in the darkness. It allowed for the recording of laws, the codification of oral traditions, including the Homeric epics, which were eventually written down, the growth of commerce through written records, and ultimately, the flourishing of philosophy, history, and drama that would define the classical age. Concurrent with this re-emergence from the Dark Ages, and indeed intimately linked to it, was the slow, organic, and truly transformative emergence of the polis, or city-state, as the fundamental unit of Greek identity and governance. Unlike the vast empires of the Near East or the centralized kingdoms of the Mycenaean era, the Greek polis was a unique political and social entity that would shape the destiny of Hellenic civilization. It was not merely a city, it was a sovereign state, comprising an urban center, the Astu, and its surrounding agricultural territory, Kora. Imagine the fragmented communities of the Dark Ages, scattered across a rugged, mountainous landscape naturally divided by high peaks and deep valleys. This challenging geography, combined with the collapse of central authority, fostered the development of numerous small, independent settlements. As populations grew and security became paramount, these settlements naturally coalesced around a defensible high point, an acropolis, meaning high city, which often housed a citadel or a temple. Below this acropolis, an urban center developed, centered around the agora, an open public space that served as a market, a meeting place, and the heart of civic life. Imagine the bustling discussions, the vigorous debates, and the vibrant commerce that would fill this central square, becoming the very pulse of the community. The polis became the cradle of Greek citizenship and self-governance. Its citizens were not merely inhabitants, they were active participants in the life of the community, expected to contribute to its defense, its governance, and its religious rituals. This concept of active citizenship, where individuals had a direct stake in their community's fate, was a radical departure from the passive subjecthood of empires. Within these numerous city-states, a dazzling array of governmental forms emerged, reflecting local conditions and competing ideals such as monarchy, ruled by a single king, aristocracy, ruled by the noble elite, oligarchy, ruled by few wealthy individuals, and lastly the groundbreaking emergence of democracy in Athens. The polis was more than just a political unit, it was a deeply integrated social, cultural, and religious entity. Citizens shared common laws, customs, religious practices, and a fierce sense of loyalty to their particular city-state. This intense local identity, while fostering immense creativity and civic pride, also contributed to fierce rivalries and frequent warfare between the various polis, a dynamic that would profoundly shape Greek history. Imagine the passionate devotion of an Athenian to Athens, a Spartan to Sparta, a Corinthian to Corinth, a loyalty often more profound than any broader Greek identity. The emergence of the polis was not a single, instantaneous event but a gradual process of political and social organization. It represented a crucial adaptation to the post-Mycenaean world, providing a framework for stability, defense, and collective action in a fragmented landscape. It was within these independent, self-governing city-states that the unique characteristics of Greek thought, its emphasis on debate, reason, law, and citizen participation, would truly blossom, laying the seeds of a new world that would distinguish itself profoundly from the vast, centralized empires of the Near East and leave an enduring legacy on Western civilization. The silent valleys and isolated communities of the Dark Ages had, unwittingly, nurtured the very crucible from which the vibrant, intellectual, and often turbulent classical Greek world would soon spring. Chapter 3: The Archaic Period, Colonization, Tyranny, and Early Thought. Our tranquil journey now brings us to a far more expansive and deeply nuanced exploration of the vibrant and transformative era known as the Archaic period in Greek history, stretching approximately from 800 BCE to 480 BCE. This was a time when the nascent polis we just explored truly began to define themselves, to flex their collective muscles, and to spread their unique culture across the vast expanse of the Mediterranean and Black Sea worlds. It was an age of remarkable demographic growth, significant social upheaval, profound economic innovation, and the very first, tentative yet resolute, stirrings of the intellectual curiosity that would later characterize classical Greece, an era when the individual and the polis began to find their true voices. One of the most astonishing and far-reaching phenomena of the Archaic period was the great, sustained wave of Greek colonization that swept across a vast geographical area. Imagine the intense pressures building within the burgeoning city-states on the Greek mainland and in Ionia. Following the slow but steady recovery from the Dark Ages, populations were expanding rapidly, outstripping the available resources of the often rugged and limited arable land. This demographic pressure led to intense competition for sustenance, often resulting in land fragmentation and widespread debt bondage, where impoverished farmers might even be forced into servitude. Alongside this economic strain, bitter political strife often simmered within the polis, as aristocratic families vied for power, leading to internal feuds and the frequent expulsion of losing factions, who, as exiles, were ripe for new beginnings elsewhere. Beyond these practical motivations, there was undoubtedly a potent and deeply human spirit of adventure, the allure of the unknown, the promise of new fortunes, and the intrinsic drive to explore the world beyond the familiar horizon. These colonizing expeditions were far from random ventures. They were typically highly organized, meticulously planned undertakings. Before embarking, the mother city, metropolis, would often consult a powerful oracle, most notably the oracle of Apollo at Delphi, to seek divine approval and guidance on the auspicious location for the new settlement. The expedition itself was led by a designated founder, the oikists, a figure of immense authority and often semi-divine status, who was responsible for allocating land, establishing laws, and supervising the construction of the new city. Imagine a band of hopeful, determined Greeks, men, women, and children, packed onto sturdy, open-deck ships, carrying sacred fire from the hearth of their mother city, navigating by the stars and the coastal landmarks, seeking a distant, fertile shore that the oracle might have hinted at. Upon arrival at a suitable site, often a defensible promontory with access to good harbor and fresh water, the new colony would be laid out. Many colonial cities, particularly the later ones, featured an orderly grid plan of streets, a testament to rational urban planning. They quickly established a central agora for public life and trade, temples for their gods, and sturdy defenses. These new cities, the apoikiai or home away from home, though politically independent from their mother cities, maintained strong cultural, religious, and crucially, economic ties. Imagine the constant flow of goods, ideas, and people between the mother city and its new offshoot, forging a vibrant, interconnected web of Hellenic influence. From the fertile shores of Sicily and southern Italy, a region so extensively settled by Greeks that it became known as Magna Graecia or Great Greece, home to powerful cities like Syracuse, Tarentum, and Naples, whose very name, Neapolis, means new city, to the rich grain-producing regions of the Black Sea, with colonies like Byzantium, the future Constantinople, and westward to the coasts of Gaul, Massilian, modern Marseille, Iberia, and parts of North Africa, a vast, dynamic network of Greek cities blossomed. This extensive colonization had absolutely profound and transformative consequences for Greek civilization. It dramatically expanded the geographical sphere of Greek influence, disseminating Greek language, customs, architectural styles, the Doric, Ionic, and nascent Corinthian orders, political ideas, and religious practices across a vast and diverse area. Imagine Greek temples rising amidst foreign landscapes, their familiar columns proclaiming the presence of Hellenic culture. Crucially, it brought the Greeks into intense and continuous contact with a wide array of other, non-Greek cultures: the sophisticated Egyptians, the astute Phoenicians, the enigmatic Etruscans, and numerous native populations. This constant interaction was a two-way street. It not only spread Greek ideas but also enriched Greek society with new technologies, artistic motifs, like Eastern floral patterns or animal friezes, and exotic goods. This cross-cultural fertilization accelerated their own development and broadened their worldview. Economically, colonization stimulated an unprecedented boom in trade, moving goods like olive oil, wine, pottery, and manufactured goods from Greece in exchange for raw materials such as timber, metals, and grain. This robust mercantile activity led to the growth of a powerful new merchant class, whose wealth rivaled that of the traditional aristocracy, and it spurred the widespread adoption of coinage, which, originating in Lydia in Asia Minor, quickly spread to Greece, revolutionizing commerce by standardizing value and facilitating large-scale exchange. Furthermore, by interacting with barbarian, non-Greek speakers, cultures, the Greeks began to forge a stronger sense of their own distinct Hellenic identity, defining themselves in contrast to others. However, this rapid growth and the attendant economic changes within the polis themselves were not without their significant internal challenges. The rise of this wealthy merchant and artisan class, whose prosperity was based on commerce rather than inherited land, directly challenged the entrenched power of the traditional landowning aristocracy. Simultaneously, many ordinary farmers, struggling with limited land, frequent poor harvests, or burdened by increasing debt, often found themselves in increasingly desperate circumstances, sometimes even facing debt slavery. This widening gap between the aristocratic elite and the burgeoning common populace created immense social and economic ferment. It was against this backdrop of tension, and paradoxically aided by the emergence of the hoplite phalanx, a new military formation of heavily armed citizen soldiers, that the phenomenon of tyranny emerged as a common, albeit often temporary, form of governance in many city-states during the 7th and 6th centuries BCE. The hoplite soldier, now a vital component of the city's defense, demanded greater political recognition for his military service, shifting the balance of power from the aristocratic cavalry. The word tyrant in ancient Greece did not initially carry the wholly negative and oppressive connotation it holds today. A tyrant was typically an individual who seized power unconstitutionally, often by force or cunning, but critically, often with the significant support of the discontented populace, the rising merchant class, the increasingly vocal hoplite farmers, or disgruntled members of the old aristocracy who sought to break the monopoly of their rivals. Imagine a charismatic leader, perhaps a former aristocrat himself, who cleverly exploited the social divisions of the time, promising to redress grievances, to break the entrenched power of the old aristocratic families, and to enact reforms beneficial to the broader citizenry. Many early tyrants, indeed, brought remarkable stability and prosperity to their cities during their reigns. They often pursued enlightened policies aimed at strengthening their polis at the expense of rival aristocrats. They actively promoted economic development, fostering trade and commerce, and crucially, investing heavily in magnificent public works. Imagine new temples rising in honor of the city's patron deities, impressive aqueducts bringing fresh water to urban centers, or formidable new fortifications enhancing the city's defense. These projects not only enhanced civic pride and monumental beauty but also created vital employment for the common people, diverting resources from the old elite to the general populace. Tyrants also often fostered significant cultural growth, patronizing arts and festivals, inviting poets and artists to their courts, and sometimes even enacting legal reforms that benefited the less privileged, providing loans to farmers or canceling debts. Think of the tyrants of Corinth like Cypselus and his son Periander, who presided over periods of great commercial wealth and artistic flourishing, or the controversial but transformative Pisistratos of Athens, who, though seizing power 3 times, ushered in a period of peace, economic stability, and cultural prosperity, including supporting the construction of the first monumental temples on the Acropolis and the formalization of the Dionysia festivals that would lead to Greek drama. Tyrants, by their very nature, stood outside the traditional aristocratic framework, and thus, paradoxically, they often served to undermine the power of the old noble clans, unwittingly preparing the ground for more broadly based forms of government. However, the inherent instability of unconstitutional rule meant that tyranny rarely endured for more than a few generations. Lacking the legitimacy of traditional lineage or popular consent, in the democratic sense, tyrants often had to resort to increasingly repressive measures, spies, purges, reliance on mercenary guards, to maintain power, especially their successors. The sons of benevolent tyrants often proved to be cruel or inept, leading to popular resentment and eventual overthrow. Tyranny ultimately failed to offer a lasting political solution, yet it had served its historical purpose. It had fundamentally broken the aristocratic monopoly on power, demonstrating that political change was possible and that the interests of the broader citizenry could be championed. This left the ground clear for the development of new constitutional forms, including, most famously, democracy. Concurrently with these dramatic social and political developments, the Archaic period witnessed the very first, tentative yet resolute, stirrings of philosophical inquiry and a brilliant blossoming of early poetic traditions, collectively setting the intellectual stage for the later classical Golden Age. Before this time, explanations for the natural world and human existence were primarily found in the rich tapestry of Greek mythology, where gods and goddesses directly controlled all phenomena and provided narratives for the inexplicable. But in the bustling, outward-looking cities of Ionia, the Greek cities on the western coast of Asia Minor, strategically positioned to absorb influences from the more ancient Near Eastern civilizations, a radical new way of thinking began to emerge. Imagine figures like Thales of Miletus, often considered by many to be the first true philosopher in the Western tradition. Instead of attributing the world's phenomena to the whims of the gods, Thales sought to understand the fundamental arch or underlying principle of the cosmos through rational observation and deduction. He famously proposed that water was the basic element from which everything derived, a startlingly rational attempt to find a single, unifying substance. Beyond his philosophical propositions, Thales was also a practical man, credited with predicting a solar eclipse and devising methods for measuring the height of pyramids. He was followed by other pre-Socratic thinkers, each grappling with fundamental questions about the nature of reality. The early philosophers like Anaximander and Pythagoras of Samos, working independently in their various polis, collectively initiated a profound, paradigm-shifting movement, a decisive move from mythological explanation to rational inquiry, from mythos to logos, from attributing events to divine fiat to seeking discernible natural laws. They questioned, They observed, they debated, and they laid the crucial intellectual groundwork for the likes of Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, effectively inventing philosophy as a distinct discipline. Ionia, with its vibrant trade, its openness to foreign ideas, and its less rigid aristocratic traditions compared to mainland Greece, proved to be an incredibly fertile ground for this intellectual revolution. Simultaneously, the Archaic period witnessed a brilliant blossoming of lyric poetry, a striking departure from the grand, epic narratives of Homer that had defined earlier Greek literature. This new form of poetry, often intended to be sung to the accompaniment of a lyre, hence lyric, was intensely personal, emotional, and often deeply reflective of individual experience. Imagine poets like Sappho of Lesbos, whose verses speak of love, desire, beauty, and the complexities of human relationships with breathtaking intimacy, tenderness, and lyrical power. Her fragments offer a rare, precious glimpse into the personal feelings and a unique female community of a distant past, celebrating beauty and affection between women. Contrasting with Sappho's delicate verses, figures like Archilochus of Poros brought a biting wit and cynical realism to his poetry. A mercenary soldier, he often described the brutal realities of war with a disarming honesty, famously declaring he'd rather drop his shield and run than die bravely, a scandalous sentiment at the time that defied traditional heroic ideals. Other poets like Alcaeus of Lesbos often wrote of political strife and drinking, while Tertius of Sparta composed stirring martial verses, inspiring hoplites to courage in battle. The wise Athenian statesman Solon also expressed his political and moral philosophy through eloquent poetry, reflecting on justice, wealth, and the ideal society. The significance of this new poetic tradition cannot be overstated. It marked a crucial step in the rise of the individual voice in Greek culture, moving away from the almost exclusive focus on collective heroic deeds and divine narratives towards the exploration of personal emotion, individual thought, and the subjective human experience. This nascent individualism, fostered by both the social mobility created by economic change and the introspective nature of lyric poetry, would become a hallmark of later Greek thought and Western intellectual tradition. Furthermore, it was during this period, particularly in the religious festivals honoring Dionysus, that the very earliest forms of Greek drama began to emerge from choral odes and improvised performances, setting the stage for the tragedies and comedies that would define Athens' golden age. Thus, the Archaic period was undeniably a crucible of profound transformation. It was a time when the Greek polis solidified its identity, expanding its cultural and economic reach across the known world through ambitious colonization. It saw the tumultuous but often progressive rule of tyrants, who, paradoxically, broke the stranglehold of the old aristocratic order. And most significantly, it was the fertile ground where the very first stirrings of rational inquiry began to challenge mythological explanations and where the deeply personal voice of the poet began to resonate, adding a new, rich dimension to Greek culture and thought. These vibrant developments, both turbulent and brilliant, meticulously set the stage for the monumental events and unparalleled achievements that awaited in the coming classical age. Chapter 4: The Persian Wars, a Crucible of Identity. Our journey now brings us to one of the most defining conflicts in ancient history, the Persian Wars. This titanic clash, fought between the independent city-states of Greece and the colossal Achaemenid Persian Empire, fundamentally shaped the course of Western civilization, for it was a contest not merely of armies, but of opposing political ideals, cultural values, and ways of life. It spanned almost half a century, from the Ionian Revolt at its outset to the final decisive battles that secured Greek freedom, fundamentally transforming the Hellenic world. To truly appreciate the magnitude of this struggle, we must first cast our gaze eastward, to the vast and awe-inspiring Achaemenid Persian Empire. By the late 6th century BCE, Persia was the largest and most powerful empire the world had ever seen, stretching from the Aegean Sea in the west to the Indus River in the east, encompassing diverse peoples and cultures under a single, highly centralized administration. Imagine an empire of unprecedented scale, capable of mobilizing immense resources and vast populations. Its rulers, figures like Cyrus the Great, Cambyses, and Darius I, had skillfully built an efficient administrative system, divided into satrapies, provinces, governed by appointed satraps, connected by a remarkable network of royal roads and swift communication. While imposing, the Persian Empire was also known for its relative tolerance towards conquered peoples, allowing them to retain their customs, religions, and local laws, provided they acknowledged Persian overlordship and paid tribute. This was a force of immense, seemingly unstoppable power, driven by an imperial ambition that recognized no natural boundaries. As the Persian Empire expanded westward, it inevitably absorbed the wealthy Greek city-states of Ionia, located on the western coast of Asia Minor, bringing them under Persian dominion. The direct spark for the great conflict was the Ionian Revolt, which erupted in 499 BCE and lasted until 493 BCE. The Ionian Greeks, fiercely proud of their Hellenic heritage and accustomed to their traditional autonomy, chafed under Persian rule. While Persian governance was often mild, the imposition of pro-Persian tyrants in their cities, the disruption of their traditional trade routes, and the heavy tribute demanded by the satraps fueled deep resentment. Imagine a populace, accustomed to self-governance, chafing under the heel of an unseen, distant emperor. Under the leadership of Aristagoras, the tyrant of Miletus, who ironically initiated the revolt to save his own skin after a failed joint expedition, the Ionian cities rose up in rebellion. Crucially, they sought and received limited support from mainland Greece. Athens and Eretria, two prominent city-states, dispatched a small naval force to aid their Ionian kin. While their contribution was militarily minor, they managed to burn the Persian regional capital of Sardis. This act, however symbolic, proved to be a fatal provocation. The revolt was eventually crushed by the overwhelming might of the Persian Empire. However, the burning of Sardis was not forgotten by the Persian king, Darius I. Imagine the simmering rage of the great king, having his regional capital desecrated by what he perceived as minor, insolent city-states across the Aegean. Darius swore revenge, famously instructing a servant to remind him 3 times daily, "Master, remember the Athenians." This act of defiance led directly to the first Persian invasion, launched by Darius I in 492 BCE. His initial campaign, led by his son-in-law Mardonius, aimed to consolidate Persian control over Thrace and Macedon and to punish Athens and Eretria. While Mardonius successfully subdued the northern regions, his fleet, caught in a violent storm off the treacherous shores of Mount Athos, suffered a catastrophic loss of some 300 ships and 20,000 men. Imagine the sheer destructive power of the Aegean's unpredictable weather, a powerful initial setback for the colossal Persian war machine. Despite this naval disaster, Darius remained undeterred. In 490 BCE, Darius launched a more direct punitive expedition, bypassing the treacherous northern route by sea. A large Persian fleet, commanded by Datis and Artaphernes, sailed directly across the Aegean, first landing on the island of Euboea, where they brutally sacked and burned the city of Eretria in retaliation for its role in the Ionian Revolt, taking its inhabitants captive. Their next target, unequivocally, was Athens. The Persian force, consisting of perhaps 25,000 to 30,000 infantry and cavalry, landed on the plain of Marathon, a flat stretch of land about 26 miles northeast of Athens. Imagine the tension in Athens as this colossal army, the symbol of the mightiest empire on earth, landed on their doorstep. The Athenians, led by the brilliant general Miltiades, could muster only about 10,000 hoplites. They sent a runner, Pheidippides, to Sparta to request aid, but the Spartans, bound by religious observance, famously delayed their departure. Faced with overwhelming numbers, Miltiades chose to engage the Persians on the plain of Marathon, a decision that would become legendary. He deployed the Athenian hoplites with a surprisingly thin center but reinforced, strong wings. Imagine the disciplined ranks of the Athenian hoplite phalanx, their bronze shields gleaming, their long spears bristling. When the Persian lines advanced, the Athenian center gave ground, drawing the Persians deeper into the trap, while the strong Athenian wings enveloped the Persian flanks in a devastating double envelopment. The hoplite phalanx, a wall of bronze and spears, proved incredibly effective against the light-armed Persian infantry. The battle was a resounding, decisive Greek victory. The Persians suffered immense casualties, estimated at over 6,000, for minimal Athenian losses. The remaining Persian forces quickly re-embarked and attempted to sail around Attica to attack Athens directly, but the vigilant Athenians, having marched swiftly back, were there to meet them. The Persians, demoralized, retreated. The Battle of Marathon was more than just a military victory, it was a profound psychological triumph. Imagine the burst of confidence, the intoxicating sense of self-belief that swept through Athens. It proved that a citizen army, fighting for its freedom, could stand against and defeat the seemingly invincible Persian Empire. It was the birth of Athenian pride and a new, bolder identity. The next decade was a period of tense interlude. Darius first died in 486 BCE, but his successor, his son Xerxes I, inherited his father's unwavering ambition and desire for vengeance. Xerxes planned an invasion of Greece on a scale unprecedented in ancient history, dwarfing Darius's earlier attempts. Imagine the sheer logistics required for such an undertaking. Xerxes amassed a combined land and sea force estimated by ancient sources to be truly colossal, though modern historians offer more conservative figures, perhaps ranging from 100,000 to 300,000 soldiers and hundreds of warships. To support this immense army, incredible engineering feats were undertaken. A pontoon bridge, a testament to Persian ingenuity, was famously built across the Hellespont, allowing the vast army to march from Asia into Europe. Imagine thousands of ships lashed together, forming a temporary roadway across the treacherous strait. Additionally, a massive canal was dug across the Athos Peninsula, a painstaking effort to avoid the same naval disaster that had crippled Mardonius's fleet years before. In Greece, the looming threat of Xerxes' invasion brought about a desperate urgency, but also exposed deep-seated internal divisions. Many smaller city-states, gripped by fear, Medized, offering earth and water, symbols of submission, to Persia. Others remained neutral or ambivalent. Yet, a core of independent Greek states, led by Athens and Sparta, formed a Hellenic League, vowing to resist. The Athenians, guided by the strategic foresight of Themistocles, recognized that the key to victory lay at sea. Themistocles persuaded the Athenians to use newly discovered silver revenues from the Laurian mines to build a powerful fleet of triremes, fast and agile warships, rather than distributing the wealth among citizens. Imagine the frantic shipbuilding in the Athenian port of Piraeus, knowing that their very survival depended on the strength of their navy. The Second Persian invasion began in 480 BCE. Xerxes' immense army, a kaleidoscope of peoples and fighting styles from across his vast empire, marched down through Thrace and Macedon. The first crucial confrontation occurred at the narrow mountain pass of Thermopylae. Here, a small force of allied Greeks, numbering perhaps 7,000, including famously 300 Spartan hoplites led by their king, Leonidas, chose to make a stand against the advancing Persian millions. Imagine the almost impossibly narrow pass, flanked by steep mountains on one side and the sea on the other, funneling the vast Persian army into a bottleneck. For 2 days, the disciplined Greek phalanx held the pass against wave after wave of Persian attacks, inflicting heavy casualties and astonishing Xerxes with their stubborn defiance. However, a local Greek traitor named Ephialtes revealed a hidden mountain path that allowed a contingent of Persian immortals to outflank the Greek position. Forewarned of the betrayal, Leonidas, understanding the futility of further resistance, famously dismissed most of the allied Greek forces, choosing to remain with his 300 Spartans, a small contingent of Thespians, and the bands to fight a heroic last stand. Imagine their final, desperate struggle, surrounded by overwhelming numbers, fighting to the death to cover the retreat of their allies and to buy precious time. Their sacrifice became an enduring symbol of courage, duty, and defiance against overwhelming odds, a powerful narrative that galvanized Greek resolve. Concurrent with Thermopylae, a critical naval engagement, the Battle of Artemisium, was fought off the northern coast of Euboea. The Greek fleet, though outnumbered, managed to hold its own against the Persian navy, inflicting damage and preventing a Persian encirclement by sea. After Thermopylae fell, the Greek fleet retreated south, allowing the Persians to continue their advance. With the pass of Thermopylae breached, the path to central Greece was open. The Persian army swept through Boeotia and into Attica. Athens, in a painful but strategically vital decision orchestrated by Themistocles, was largely evacuated. Its citizens, including women, children, and the elderly, were ferried to the island of Salamis and to the Peloponnese, leaving their beloved city to the invaders. Imagine the heartbreaking sight of the Athenian populace abandoning their homes, knowing what lay ahead. Xerxes' forces marched into Athens and, in a brutal act of retribution, burned the Acropolis and the city to the ground, fulfilling Darius's earlier vow. The true turning point of the war came with the Battle of Salamis in September of 480 BCE. The main Greek fleet, primarily Athenian triremes, took up position in the narrow straits between the island of Salamis and the Attic mainland. Themistocles, with audacious cunning, famously employed a stratagem to lure the massive Persian fleet into these confined waters. He sent a supposed traitor to Xerxes, suggesting that the Greek fleet was demoralized and planning to slip away. Xerxes, eager for a decisive victory, took the bait, ordering his vast navy to enter the narrow straits. Imagine the Persian ships, designed for open-sea maneuver, now struggling in the constricted space, their sheer numbers becoming a disadvantage. The smaller, more agile, and skillfully handled Greek triremes, with their bronze rams, moved with devastating precision. The chaotic battle saw the Persian fleet utterly decimated, with hundreds of ships lost and their naval supremacy shattered. Xerxes, watching from a vantage point on the shore, witnessed the catastrophic destruction of his navy. This was a decisive Greek naval victory, a testament to strategic brilliance and naval discipline, marking the definitive turning point of the war. With his supply lines disrupted and the morale of his remaining forces shattered, Xerxes, fearing being cut off, famously departed Greece, leaving a substantial land force under his general Mardonius to complete the conquest. The final decisive engagements occurred in 479 BCE. Mardonius, with the remnants of the Persian army, remained in Greece, attempting to force the remaining Greek allies into submission. However, a unified Greek land force, comprising Spartans, Athenians, and many other Peloponnesian allies, finally confronted Mardonius's forces at the Battle of Plataea in Boeotia. Under the overall command of the Spartan regent Pausanias, the disciplined Greek hoplite phalanx once again proved its superiority on land. After a prolonged and desperate struggle, the Greeks achieved a decisive victory, shattering the last vestiges of the main Persian invasion force and killing Mardonius. Simultaneously, almost concurrently with Plataea, the Greek fleet engaged the remaining Persian fleet at the Battle of Mycale, off the coast of Ionia. Here, the Greeks achieved another significant naval and land victory, destroying the remaining Persian ships and encouraging the Ionian Greeks to once again revolt against Persian rule, effectively liberating them. The consequences and enduring impact of the Persian Wars were utterly profound, shaping not only the immediate future of Greece but the long arc of Western civilization. Most crucially, the shared struggle against a formidable common foe forged an unprecedented, though ultimately fragile, sense of Hellenic identity. Prior to these wars, Greek loyalty was almost exclusively to one's individual polis. Imagine Athenians, Spartans, Corinthians, and others, often fierce rivals, fighting shoulder to shoulder, united by a common language, religion, and the shared ideal of freedom against foreign subjugation. This collective experience, particularly the heroic stands at Thermopylae and Marathon, fostered a powerful myth of Greek unity and exceptionalism. The wars definitively cemented the rise of Athens as a major power. Its strategic vision in building the trireme fleet and its crucial role in the naval victories at Marathon and Salamis earned it immense prestige and confidence. This newfound prominence would directly lead to the formation of the Delian League, an alliance initially formed to protect against future Persian incursions, but which Athens would gradually transform into its own vast naval empire, fueling its economic and cultural zenith. Sparta's role was equally vital, demonstrating its unparalleled land military prowess and providing the crucial leadership for the hoplite forces at Thermopylae and Plataea, confirming its reputation as the supreme land power in Greece. Above all, the Persian Wars ensured the preservation of Greek freedom and its unique culture. Imagine the alternative. Had the Persians conquered Greece, the nascent ideas of democracy, rational philosophy, and diverse artistic expression might have been stifled under an imperial bureaucracy. The Greek victory allowed their distinct intellectual and political experiments to flourish unimpeded, setting the stage for the unparalleled achievements of the classical era. For the Persian Empire, the defeat was a humiliation and a significant setback, forcing them to turn their attention elsewhere and effectively ending their westward expansion into mainland Europe, though they would continue to exert influence in the Aegean for decades. Finally, the immense confidence, the wealth generated from subsequent alliances, like the Delian League, and the profound lessons learned from unity and ingenuity, directly set the stage for the Golden Age that would follow, particularly in Athens. The Persian Wars were a crucible that forged not just an army, but a civilization, instilling in the Greeks a powerful belief in their own capabilities and destiny. Chapter 5. The Golden Age of Athens: Democracy, Drama, and Dazzling Intellect. The Golden Age of Athens was a remarkable era, roughly spanning from the end of the Persian Wars in 479 BCE to the outbreak of the Peloponnesian War in 431 BCE, was a period of such concentrated innovation in politics, philosophy, art, and literature that it continues to inspire and challenge us millennia later. It was a time when Athens, having bravely endured and triumphed against the mightiest empire of its day, stood as a beacon of human potential, embodying an almost intoxicating sense of limitless possibility. The foundation of this golden age was, undeniably, the aftermath of the Persian Wars. Athens, having played the pivotal role in the naval victories at Marathon and Salamis, emerged from the conflict with immense prestige, an unshakable sense of self-confidence, and a formidable navy. This naval power became the cornerstone of its rising influence. To protect against any future Persian incursions and to liberate Greek cities still under Persian sway, Athens spearheaded the formation of the Delian League in 478 BCE. Imagine a grand alliance of numerous Greek city-states, contributing ships or funds to a common treasury, originally located on the sacred island of Delos. Athens, initially seen as the protector and leader, gradually transformed this voluntary alliance into a de facto Athenian empire. Tribute, once voluntary contributions, became compulsory, enforced by Athenian naval might. City-states attempting to secede were swiftly crushed, their autonomy curtailed. This imperial hegemony, though controversial and often resented by its allies, provided Athens with vast wealth, a steady stream of tribute and resources that fueled its ambitious public works programs, supported its powerful fleet, and provided a comfortable living for many of its citizens, setting the material conditions for its cultural explosion. At the heart of this extraordinary period was the towering figure of Pericles, whose leadership from approximately 461 to 429 BCE became synonymous with the Golden Age itself. Pericles, a brilliant orator, astute politician, and unwavering champion of democracy, articulated a grand vision for Athens. He believed that Athens should not only be politically supreme but also intellectually and culturally unrivaled, a shining example to the entire Hellenic world. Imagine Pericles, standing before the Athenian assembly, his powerful voice advocating for the ambitious building projects, the continued support for the arts, and the radical expansion of democratic participation, shaping the very trajectory of his city. Pericles' vision was inextricably linked to the remarkable evolution of Athenian democracy. Unlike modern representative democracies, Athenian democracy was direct, allowing eligible male citizens to directly participate in the decision-making process. Imagine thousands of citizens gathering on the Pnyx hill for the assembly, ecclesia, raising their hands to vote on laws, declare war, or decide foreign policy. Every citizen had the right to speak, propose motions, and cast his vote. This was government by the people, for those who qualified as citizens. The machinery of this direct democracy was complex and remarkably participatory. Beyond the assembly, the daily affairs of the city were managed by the Council of 500 Boulei, whose members were chosen annually by lot from across the 10 tribes, ensuring a wide representation of citizens. Imagine ordinary Athenians, farmers, artisans, and merchants suddenly finding themselves responsible for drafting legislation, managing the city's finances, or overseeing naval affairs for a year. Furthermore, the Athenian legal system revolved around vast popular courts, dikasteria, often comprising hundreds or even thousands of citizen jurors, also chosen by lot. Imagine an accused individual facing a jury of 501 or even 1,001 fellow citizens, who would listen to arguments and cast their votes directly into urns. This extensive use of selection by lot, sortition, for many public offices, except for military generals, who were elected for their expertise, was a core tenet of Athenian democracy, rooted in the belief that all citizens were equally capable of governance and that random selection prevented the concentration of power and corruption. Accountability was also paramount, with officials subject to rigorous review and citizens empowered to bring charges against those they believed had harmed the state. However, it is crucial to acknowledge the inherent limitations of this revolutionary system from a modern perspective. Athenian democracy, for all its groundbreaking features, was far from universal. It was a democracy of citizens, for citizens. The vast majority of the population was excluded. Women, regardless of their social standing, possessed no political rights and were largely confined to the domestic sphere. Slaves, who likely constituted a significant portion of the population, perhaps 1/3 or more, were entirely without rights and served as the economic backbone of society, and metics, resident foreigners. Though often prosperous and contributing significantly to Athenian commerce and culture, were denied citizenship and political participation. While revolutionary for its time, it was an exclusive club, built upon a foundation of non-citizen labor and the disenfranchisement of a large majority. Yet, for those who were citizens, it offered an unparalleled degree of political freedom and direct involvement in the governance of their polis. Fueled by the wealth of empire and the pride of democracy, Pericles initiated a breathtaking architectural program that transformed the Athenian Acropolis into a dazzling symbol of Athenian power, piety, and cultural supremacy. Imagine the sacred hill, rising majestically above the city, now envisioned as a monument to Athena and the spirit of Athens itself. The artistic direction was often under the master sculptor Phidias, whose genius guided the monumental scale and exquisite detail of these structures. The crowning glory of this program was, undoubtedly, the Parthenon, a magnificent temple dedicated to Athena Parthenos, Athena the Virgin, the city's patron goddess. Imagine its harmonious proportions, a majestic Doric temple with subtle optical refinements, seemingly straight lines actually curving slightly to create an illusion of perfection and lightness, defying the rigid geometry of the stone. Its decorative sculpture, largely overseen by Phidias, was a feast for the eyes and a narrative of Athenian identity. The metapiece depicted mythical battles, Olympian gods versus giants, Lapiths versus centaurs, Greeks versus Amazons, Greeks versus Trojans, symbolizing the triumph of order over chaos, and implicitly, Greek civilization over barbarism. The continuous frieze running around the inner cella wall depicted the Panathenaic procession, celebrating the Athenians themselves, their piety, and civic pride. The pediments, the triangular gables at either end, contained awe-inspiring sculptures depicting the birth of Athena and the contest between Athena and Poseidon for the patronage of Athens. Within stood Phidias's colossal chryselephantine, gold and ivory, statue of Athena, shimmering in the inner sanctuary. The Parthenon was not just a temple, it was a grand statement of Athenian power, a devotional offering, and a timeless work of art. Surrounding the Parthenon, other structures graced the Acropolis. The Propylaea, the monumental gateway to the sacred precinct, was an architectural masterpiece in itself, combining Doric and Ionic elements with breathtaking symmetry. Imagine passing through its grand marble entrance, a symbolic threshold into the heart of Athenian power and devotion. To its south stood the elegant, diminutive temple of Athena Nike, celebrating victory. And to the north, the exquisitely unique Erechtheion, a multi-level, multifaceted temple dedicated to various ancient cults and deities, famed for its delicate Ionic order, and the iconic porch of the Caryatids, where draped female figures serve as columns, embodying grace and strength. The entire Acropolis program was a unified vision, transforming the sacred hill into an unparalleled tableau of human artistic achievement and civic pride, leaving an indelible mark on architectural history. Beyond the stone and marble, Athens' golden age witnessed an astonishing flourishing of drama, elevating theatrical performance to a profound civic and artistic institution. Imagine the vibrant atmosphere of the Dionysian festivals, annual celebrations in honor of Dionysus, the god of wine and revelry, during which dramatic competitions were the centerpiece. These plays were not mere entertainment, they were deeply embedded in the civic life of Athens, serving as a form of public education, moral debate, and collective catharsis. Tragedy reached its apex with the works of three towering figures in Greek theatre. Aeschylus, the earliest of the great tragedians, explored grand themes of divine justice, inherited guilt, and the evolution of law, most famously in his trilogy The Oresteia, Agamemnon, the libation bearers, the Eumenides. His audience grappled with monumental moral dilemmas, torn between revenge and justice, fate and free will, as his characters struggled with their destiny. Sophocles, a master of dramatic irony and psychological depth, delved into the complexities of human suffering, fate, and the limits of human knowledge. His iconic works, Oedipus Rex and Antigone, captivated the audience with the tragic consequences of human pride and the clash between divine law and human decree, leading to a catharsis, a purging of emotions, through the inevitable downfall of his flawed but noble heroes. Finally, Euripides, the most innovative and controversial of the tragedians, pushed the boundaries of traditional myths and heroic ideals. His plays, such as Medea and the Bacchae, presented characters marked by psychological complexity, realism, and sometimes a cynical view of human nature and divine justice, confronting the audience with intense emotions and the dark side of human passion. In stark contrast to the gravity of tragedy, comedy also flourished, with Aristophanes being its undisputed master. Imagine his plays, like Lysistrata, where women go on a sex strike to end war, or The Clouds, a hilarious satire on Socrates and sophistry, filled with outrageous slapstick, absurd plots, witty puns, and often biting political and social commentary. Aristophanes used comedy as a powerful vehicle for satire, lampooning politicians, philosophers, social trends, and even the gods themselves, often with direct and unflinching criticism of contemporary Athenian society, highlighting the extraordinary freedom of speech enjoyed by citizens. The Greek theatre itself was a civic institution, with vast open-air amphitheatres like the Theatre of Dionysus on the slopes of the Acropolis, capable of holding thousands of spectators. Actors, usually only 3, wore elaborate masks to portray multiple roles and convey emotion, while the chorus provided commentary, context, and often embodied the voice of the community. The intellectual climate of Golden Age Athens fostered an atmosphere of intense debate and critical inquiry. While earlier thinkers had laid the groundwork, it was here that philosophical thought truly blossomed, shifting its focus from the natural world to the human condition. At the heart of this intellectual ferment stood Socrates, c. 470 to 399 BC, an enigmatic and profoundly influential figure who left no written works of his own, known to us primarily through the writings of his students, most notably Plato. Socrates rejected the cosmological speculations of the pre-Socratics, choosing instead to focus intently on ethics, morality, and the human soul. His revolutionary approach, known as the Socratic method or elenchus, involved relentless questioning, engaging individuals in dialogue, exposing contradictions in their beliefs, and leading them to greater self-awareness. Imagine Socrates, a humble, almost gruff figure, wandering the agora, engaging citizens in seemingly simple conversations that invariably led to profound self-examination. His famous dictum, "The unexamined life is not worth living," encapsulates his lifelong mission to encourage critical self-reflection and the pursuit of virtue. His relentless questioning, however, eventually made him enemies among the Athenian elite, leading to his controversial trial and execution in 399 BCE on charges of impiety and corrupting the youth, a tragic end that nevertheless cemented his image as a martyr for truth and intellectual freedom, profoundly impacting his student Plato. Socrates stood in stark contrast to the sophists, who were prominent intellectual figures of the time, often itinerant teachers who charged fees for instruction in rhetoric, persuasion, and argument. Figures like Protagoras, famous for his declaration, "Man is the measure of all things," championed a form of moral relativism, arguing that truth was subjective and dependent on individual perception. Gorgias, another influential sophist, explored the power of rhetoric itself, often demonstrating that one could argue any side of a case persuasively. While often criticized by Socrates and Plato for prioritizing persuasion over truth, the sophists played a vital role in developing rhetorical skills, critical thinking, and a focus on human agency, reflecting the increasingly sophisticated intellectual landscape of Athens. The Golden Age also saw the birth of serious historical writing, moving beyond mere chronicle or epic poetry. Herodotus, often hailed as the father of history, wrote his monumental histories, primarily detailing the Persian Wars. Imagine Herodotus, a tireless traveler and inquisitive observer, collecting stories, conducting interviews, and describing the diverse customs and cultures of the various peoples involved in the conflict. While his work sometimes included anecdotal evidence and divine explanations, he meticulously gathered information, distinguishing his approach from purely mythological accounts. Following him, Thucydides, the historian of the Peloponnesian War, is often called the father of scientific history for his rigorous methodology. Imagine Thucydides, an Athenian general who experienced the war firsthand, committing to factual accuracy, analyzing cause and effect, and dissecting human nature and political motivations with unparalleled analytical depth. He meticulously examined evidence, sought out multiple perspectives, and crafted a narrative designed to reveal universal truths about power, ambition, and conflict, writing not for a prize in a competition, but as a possession for all time. His work stands as a model of dispassionate, analytical historical inquiry. In the realm of art, particularly sculpture, Athenian artists pushed the boundaries of naturalism and idealized human form. They perfected the technique of contrapposto, where the human figure stands with weight shifted to one leg, creating a more dynamic and lifelike pose. Imagine the athletic, graceful figures of male and female deities and heroes, embodying physical perfection and intellectual poise, often crafted from gleaming Parian marble. Vase painting, too, continued to evolve, moving from earlier black figure styles to the more expressive red figure technique, allowing for greater detail and realism in depicting myths, daily life, and heroic deeds. The intellectual climate of Golden Age Athens was, in essence, an unprecedented crucible of creativity. It was an atmosphere of vibrant debate, rigorous inquiry, fearless experimentation, and boundless innovation. The city was a magnet for the brightest minds of the Hellenic world, a place where ideas were freely exchanged, challenged, and refined, leading to an astonishing outpouring of genius in almost every conceivable field of human endeavor. Athens during this period was truly, as Pericles famously declared, the school of Hellas, the very education of Greece. Chapter 6: Sparta and the Peloponnesian War, the Clash of Worlds. Our tranquil journey now brings us to the formidable city-state of Sparta, a stark and often bewildering contrast to the vibrant, open, and democratic Athens. Located in the fertile valley of Laconia, in the Peloponnese, Sparta was an inland power, inherently distinct from maritime Athens. Unlike its Athenian counterpart, Sparta cultivated a society that was rigidly militaristic, oligarchic, and profoundly conservative, prioritizing communal discipline and martial prowess above all else. To truly understand the Peloponnesian War, we must first immerse ourselves in the unique and often austere world of Sparta itself. The legendary foundation of Sparta's unique societal structure is attributed to the mythical lawgiver, Lycurgus, said to have lived around the 9th century BCE. Whether Lycurgus was a real person or a symbolic representation of a gradual evolution of laws, his reforms established a system designed to create a state of professional, peerless soldiers, entirely devoted to military service and civic duty. From birth, a Spartan male's life was meticulously controlled and directed towards the state. Weak or sickly infants were reportedly left to die of exposure, while the healthy ones were nurtured but with austerity. At the tender age of 7, boys were taken from their mothers and entered the Aegean, a brutal, rigorous state-controlled training program that instilled absolute obedience, physical endurance, cunning, and martial skill. Imagine boys living in communal barracks, often barefoot and lightly clothed, enduring harsh discipline, meager rations, and constant physical training, forging them into the legendary Spartan hoplites. Personal comfort and individual expression were sacrificed for the collective good of the state. Spartans ate in communal messes, syssitia, fostering comradeship and preventing any display of luxury. Even their currency, legend has it, consisted of heavy, low-value iron bars to discourage trade and the accumulation of personal wealth, thus ensuring that luxury and commerce would not corrupt their austere military focus. Spartan society was meticulously divided into distinct social classes. At the pinnacle stood the Spartiates, the full citizens, a small and exclusive class of professional soldiers who alone held political rights. These were the men who underwent the Aegoge, lived communally, and dedicated their entire lives to military training and service. Their needs were provided for by the state, ostensibly freeing them from manual labor. Below them were the perioikoi, meaning dwellers around. These were free non-citizens living in surrounding towns, who engaged in commerce, crafts, and farming, providing the essential goods and services that the Spartiates, focused solely on military training, did not produce themselves. They served as allies in battle but had no political voice. At the very bottom of this rigid hierarchy were the Helots, the vast majority of the population, often subjugated Mycenaeans or Laconians, who were state-owned serfs tied to the land. They worked the land, producing the food that sustained the Spartiate class. The Helots vastly outnumbered the Spartiates, perhaps by a ratio of 7 or 8 to 1, and their constant, simmering threat of revolt was the primary, inescapable driver behind Sparta's intense militarism and the pervasive fear that permeated Spartiate society. Imagine living in a state of perpetual vigilance, knowing that a massive, subjugated population yearned for freedom and could rise up at any moment. This ever-present internal threat fundamentally shaped every aspect of Spartan life, making continuous military readiness an existential necessity. Sparta's government reflected its unique social structure. It was an oligarchy, rather than a monarchy or a democracy. It featured a unique system of dual kingship, with two kings from two different royal families holding military and religious authority, often serving as a check on each other's power. Real political power, however, largely resided with the Gerousia, a council of 28 elders, over 60 years old, chosen for life, who advised the kings and prepared legislation. A broader assembly, Apella, of all Spartiate males could vote on proposals, but without open debate. The most powerful officials were the 5 ephors, elected annually by the assembly, who possessed immense oversight powers, could veto decisions of the kings and Gerousia, and even conducted the Aegoge. This intricate system was designed for stability, resistance to change, and the maintenance of the strict military order. Imagine the stark contrast between these two leading Greek powers. On one hand, Athens, an open, maritime city, vibrant with commerce, embracing innovation and a radical direct democracy, where debate and individuality flourished, and whose wealth supported magnificent arts and intellectual pursuits. On the other, Sparta, an inland, agrarian, closed society, a disciplined military machine ruled by a conservative oligarchy, where the individual was subsumed by the state, and where the pervasive fear of Helot revolt dictated every aspect of life. This fundamental ideological and societal divergence, exacerbated by their respective ambitions, was the deep undercurrent of the coming conflict. As the golden age of Athens reached its zenith, the growing tensions between Athens and Sparta became increasingly palpable and ultimately inevitable, inexorably leading to the devastating Peloponnesian War. The underlying cause was the irreconcilable ideological clash. Athenian democracy and its burgeoning naval empire represented a dynamic, expansionist force that fundamentally threatened the traditional, conservative, and oligarchic values of Sparta and its Peloponnesian allies. Sparta, deeply suspicious of Athenian power, feared the continued spread of democracy and the erosion of its own traditional sphere of influence. Their allies, particularly the powerful naval and commercial cities like Corinth and Megara, felt directly threatened by Athens' economic expansion and naval dominance in the Aegean. Imagine the Spartan assembly, with powerful allies like Corinth arguing vehemently that Athenian ambition must be checked before it consumed the entire Greek world. Several specific incidents served as immediate triggers, escalating the simmering tensions into open war. One was the dispute over Corcyra, modern Corfu, a strategically important island colony of Corinth. When Corcyra found itself in conflict with its mother city, Corinth, a key Spartan ally, it sought an alliance with Athens. Athens, eager to gain a strategic naval base, provided limited military assistance, infuriating Corinth. Another flashpoint was the affair of Potidaea, a Corinthian colony that was a member of the Athenian-dominated Delian League. When Potidaea rebelled against Athens, prompted by Spartan promises of support, Athens laid siege to the city, further antagonizing Corinth. Finally, the Megarian decree, imposed by Athens against Megara, another Spartan ally, was a crippling economic embargo that banned Megarian ships from all ports of the Athenian Empire. This severe economic pressure convinced Megara, along with Corinth, that war was the only solution. Under intense pressure from its allies, Sparta, despite its inherent caution, reluctantly declared that Athens had violated the 30 Years' Peace, effectively initiating the Peloponnesian War in 431 BCE. The Peloponnesian War, a conflict of unprecedented scale and brutality for the Greek world, lasted for an agonizing 27 years, from 431 to 404 BC, devastating the Greek city-states and bringing an end to the radiant brilliance of the Golden Age. Thucydides, who fought in and meticulously documented this war, understood it as a struggle between two fundamentally different powers, a clash between the land-based might of Sparta and the naval supremacy of Athens. The war can be broadly divided into three phases. The Archaic War, 431 to 421 BC, named after the Spartan king Archidamus II. This phase saw the two sides employ vastly different strategies. Sparta, relying on its invincible hoplite army, adopted a strategy of yearly invasions of Attica. Imagine the Spartan army marching into Athenian territory, systematically burning crops, destroying farms, and devastating the countryside, attempting to lure the Athenians out into a decisive land battle. However, Athens, guided by Pericles' brilliant strategy, famously refused to engage in open battle. Pericles ordered the entire Athenian population of Attica to withdraw within the formidable long walls, massive fortifications that connected Athens to its port of Piraeus, making the city a virtually impregnable island fortress. Athens relied on its powerful navy to import all necessary supplies by sea and to launch devastating retaliatory naval raids against the Spartan coast and its allies. Imagine the Athenian citizens, huddled within the crowded confines of the long walls, watching their fields burn in the distance, but secure in their naval dominance. The fatal blow to Athens in this phase came not from Spartan spears, but from a terrifying epidemic, the Plague of Athens, which erupted in 430 BCE. This horrific plague, likely a virulent form of typhus or typhoid fever, raged through the overcrowded city for several years, devastating the population. Imagine the unspeakable horror, the rapid onset of fever, vomiting, and agonizing death, spreading relentlessly through the confined urban space. It claimed the lives of an estimated 1/4 to 1/3 of the Athenian population, including, tragically, Pericles himself in 429 BCE. The plague shattered Athenian morale, destabilized its government, and led to a profound decline in civic order and a rise in ruthless ambition. Without Pericles' steady hand, Athenian leadership fell to more aggressive and opportunistic figures like Cleon, a demagogue who championed a more hardline approach to the war. Despite the plague, Athens achieved some notable successes, such as the strategic victory at Sphacteria in 425 BCE, where a contingent of Spartan hoplites was trapped and forced to surrender, an unprecedented humiliation for Sparta. However, key Spartan victories, particularly at Amphipolis in 422 BCE, where both the aggressive Athenian general Cleon and the brilliant Spartan general Brasidas were killed, eventually led to exhaustion on both sides. This phase concluded with the signing of the Peace of Nisches in 421 BC, a fragile and uneasy truce that proved to be merely a temporary respite. The Sicilian expedition, 415 to 413 BC. The fragile peace was shattered by a monumental act of Athenian hubris and misguided ambition. Under the persuasive influence of the charismatic but ultimately unreliable general Alcibiades, Athens decided to launch a massive, ambitious military expedition to Sicily in 415 BC, ostensibly to aid their allies in Segesta against Syracuse, a powerful Dorian city and Spartan ally. Imagine the grand assembly of Athens, captivated by Alcibiades' promises of immense wealth and glory, voting to commit a vast portion of their remaining resources to this distant enterprise. The expedition was a colossal undertaking, involving a massive armada of over 100 triremes and tens of thousands of hoplites and other troops. It was the largest overseas expedition ever launched by a Greek state. However, it quickly descended into a series of strategic blunders, poor leadership, with Alcibiades himself defecting to Sparta after being recalled on charges of sacrilege, and determined Syracusan resistance aided by Spartan generals. The entire Athenian force, after a brutal siege and desperate naval battles in the harbor of Syracuse, was utterly annihilated. Imagine the horror of thousands of Athenian soldiers and sailors trapped and slaughtered, or condemned to agonizing deaths in Syracusan stone quarries. The disastrous outcome of the Sicilian expedition was a crippling blow to Athens. It represented a colossal loss of manpower, ships, and financial resources from which Athens would never fully recover. It marked the definitive turning point of the war, shifting the momentum decisively in Sparta's favor. The Decelean War, Ionian War, 413 to 404 BC. Emboldened by the Sicilian disaster, Sparta renewed the conflict with a renewed vigor, aided by strategic advice from the Athenian defector Alcibiades. A crucial turning point in this final phase was the Spartan occupation of Decelia in Attica. This permanent Spartan base, located just 14 miles north of Athens, subjected the city to constant harassment, cut off its land supply routes, and allowed thousands of Athenian slaves to defect. Imagine Athens now living under a perpetual siege, its citizens constantly on edge, its economic lifeline through Attica severed. Crucially, Sparta, recognizing its naval inferiority, began to build a formidable fleet, financed by a surprising and controversial ally, the Persian Empire. Cyrus the Younger, the Persian satrap of Lydia, eager to weaken Athens, which had supported rebellions against Persia in the past, provided vast sums of money to finance the construction of Spartan warships. This Persian financial support proved instrumental. The final years of the war saw a series of desperate naval engagements. The Spartan admiral Lysander emerged as the decisive figure, a brilliant and ruthless strategist. After several hard-fought battles, Lysander delivered the final, crippling blow at the Battle of Aegospotami in 405 BC. Here, he caught the Athenian fleet unprepared and utterly destroyed almost all of Athens' remaining warships. Imagine the sheer despair that must have gripped Athens as the news of this irreparable naval defeat reached its walls. With its fleet gone, its supply lines cut, and its people starving, Athens was left utterly vulnerable. The siege of Athens that followed was swift and brutal. With no navy to import food and no army to break the Spartan blockade, the city, once so vibrant and powerful, was starved into submission. In 404 BCE, Athens formally surrendered. The terms were harsh. The long walls, symbols of Athenian imperial pride, were torn down to the mournful sound of flutes. Athens' remaining fleet was surrendered, its democratic government was abolished and replaced by a pro-Spartan oligarchy of the 30 tyrants, who ruled with extreme brutality for a brief period, and it was forced to dismantle its empire. The Golden Age had come to a tragic and decisive end. The consequences of the Peloponnesian War were profound and devastating. altering the entire trajectory of the Greek world. The most immediate impact was the end of Athenian empire and hegemony. Athens was militarily crippled, its political institutions shattered, and its economic power severely diminished. Sparta emerged victorious, establishing its own brief and often brutal hegemony over Greece. However, Sparta proved ill-suited to managing an empire. Its rigid, militaristic system, designed for internal control and land warfare, lacked the diplomatic flexibility and administrative capacity needed to govern a vast network of disparate city-states. Its rule was widely resented, leading to instability and further conflict. The war brought overall devastation to Greece. Decades of brutal fighting, massive loss of life, including the plague, economic ruin, and political instability left the Greek city-states exhausted and deeply fractured. The relentless interstate warfare eroded the fragile unity forged during the Persian Wars and left a legacy of deep mistrust. There was a noticeable moral and political decline. The protracted conflict, marked by atrocities and shifting loyalties, fostered a sense of cynicism and disillusionment with the ideals that had once animated the polis. The rise of ruthless realpolitik, as famously documented by Thucydides in the Melian dialogue, replaced earlier notions of justice and honor. In Athens, the experience of the 30 tyrants and the subsequent execution of Socrates further fueled a sense of moral crisis and a questioning of democratic ideals. The war also saw the rise of mercenaries, professional soldiers fighting for pay, replacing the citizen hoplite armies, signaling a decline in civic participation in warfare. Ultimately, the self-inflicted wounds of the Peloponnesian War left the Greek city-states exhausted, weakened, and deeply divided. This profound weakening of the traditional Greek powers created a dangerous power vacuum and opened the way for a new, rising power to the north, Macedon, which would eventually subjugate the entirety of Greece, bringing an end to the era of independent city-states and ushering in a new age. Chapter 7: Philosophy and the Hellenistic Age, From Polis to Cosmos. The world, having just witnessed Alexander's meteoric ascent and equally abrupt demise, plunged into a tumultuous era of profound redefinition. His sudden death in 323 BCE, without a clearly designated heir, unleashed decades of brutal and protracted conflict among his leading generals, known as the Diadochi, or successors. These were not minor skirmishes. They were grand, multifaceted wars that spanned continents, with ambitious commanders constantly shifting alliances and betraying former comrades. Each general, consumed by ambition, sought to claim the vast inheritance, leading to a complex, ever-changing geopolitical landscape. From this violent crucible, three dominant Hellenistic kingdoms eventually solidified their power, effectively carving up Alexander's immense realm and fundamentally altering the political fabric of the ancient world. This period, stretching from Alexander's death until the final Roman conquest of the last Hellenistic kingdom, Ptolemaic Egypt, in 31 BC, became known as the Hellenistic Age, an era distinct from the classical polis system that had preceded it. Among these successor states, the Ptolemaic kingdom of Egypt rose to become arguably the wealthiest and most stable. Ruled by Ptolemy I Soter, Alexander's trusted general, and his subsequent line of descendants, the Ptolemies skillfully leveraged Egypt's immense agricultural wealth and strategic position. Their capital, Alexandria, quickly transformed into the preeminent intellectual, cultural, and commercial hub of the entire Hellenistic world. Imagine this magnificent city, meticulously laid out on a grid plan by the architect Dinocrates, boasting not only a vast port but also wonders like the monumental lighthouse of Pharos, one of the seven wonders of the ancient world, its towering height guiding ships across the Mediterranean. But it was the Library of Alexandria that truly defined the city's intellectual supremacy. This colossal institution, more than just a collection of scrolls, was a true research institute, often associated with the museum or Mycenaean, dedicated to the Muses, attracting scholars, poets, and scientists from across the known world. Imagine countless papyrus scrolls, meticulously copied and catalogued, containing the cumulative knowledge of the Greek world and beyond. The Ptolemies, while Greek, skillfully adopted many pharaonic traditions, even depicting themselves as pharaohs, fostering a fascinating blend of Greek and Egyptian cultures, exemplified by new cults like that of Serapis, a syncretic deity appealing to both Greek and Egyptian worshippers. Concurrently, the Seleucid Empire, founded by Seleucus I Nicator, encompassed the largest territory. It stretched across much of the Near East, from Asia Minor and Syria, through Mesopotamia, and all the way to the borders of India. Its sheer, sprawling size and incredibly diverse populations, speaking myriad languages and adhering to countless local customs, made it inherently unstable and perpetually prone to fragmentation. The Seleucids constantly battled internal rebellions from local satraps and external threats from burgeoning powers on their frontiers, making the maintenance of control over such a disparate realm a constant, arduous challenge. Their capital, Ansh, became another major Hellenistic center, a testament to Greek urban planning in the East. Finally, the Antigonid kingdom of Macedon and Greece, established by Antigonus I Monophthalmus and his successors, maintained a more direct, though often contested, control over mainland Greece itself. Yet, even here, their rule was not absolute. They were frequently embroiled in clashes with the remaining independent Greek city-states, which valiantly struggled, though largely in vain, to regain their lost autonomy. Leagues such as the Achaean and Aetolian confederacies emerged as significant powers, often vying for independence or playing the larger kingdoms against each other, highlighting that the spirit of the polis, though politically subjugated, was far from extinguished. The very character of this Hellenistic world was profoundly shaped by Alexander's conquests and the resulting formation of these vast, multi-ethnic superkingdoms. A key feature that emerged was a new sense of cosmopolitanism. The intense, often fierce, and exclusive loyalty once given solely to the individual polis now significantly declined. It was gradually replaced by a broader understanding of oneself as part of a larger Hellenistic world, with one's primary allegiance often shifting towards the figure of the king, or to a shared Hellenic cultural identity that transcended local boundaries. This broader identity was significantly facilitated by the widespread adoption of Koine Greek, a common dialect that became the lingua franca across the entire Eastern Mediterranean, allowing for unprecedented communication and cultural exchange across diverse lands. This period also witnessed massive urbanization, driven by the founding of countless new cities throughout the former Persian Empire. Many of these, like the multiple cities named Alexandria, or others such as Ansh, Pergamon, and Seleucia, were meticulously planned, often on grid systems, and served as vital centers of Greek culture, administration, and commerce. Imagine these new cities, transplanted bastions of Hellenism, complete with their own gymnasia for athletic and intellectual training, grand theaters for dramatic performances, and bustling agoras, all serving as powerful agents of Hellenization across vast non-Greek territories. Perhaps most fascinating was the intense syncretism that blossomed, a remarkable blending of Greek and Eastern cultures. This was not a one-way street of imposition, but a dynamic, reciprocal process. Greek language, art forms, philosophical ideas, and political structures spread widely throughout the East, subtly influencing indigenous traditions. Simultaneously, Greek culture itself began to absorb Eastern influences, particularly in areas such as religion, where new mystery cults gained prominence, in art, which often combined Greek naturalism with Eastern monumentality, and even in administrative practices, which sometimes adopted local bureaucratic forms. Imagine the rich, diverse blend of styles and intellectual currents found in magnificent cities like Alexandria or Ansh, a true melting pot of ancient civilizations. This period also fostered extraordinary advancements in scientific and scholarly pursuit, often centered around the royal patronage of the Hellenistic kings, particularly the Ptolemies in Alexandria. The great centers of learning attracted brilliant minds from across the Hellenic world. Thinkers like Euclid, for instance, meticulously systematized geometry in his monumental work, The Elements, a foundational text for logical reasoning and mathematics that would remain unsurpassed for 2 millennia. Archimedes of Syracuse made groundbreaking discoveries in mathematics, physics, and engineering, famously calculating pi with impressive accuracy, devising principles of levers and buoyancy, and even designing ingenious war machines to defend his city. Eratosthenes, working in Alexandria, famously calculated the circumference of the Earth with remarkable accuracy using simple geometric principles and shadow measurements at different latitudes. Hipparchus made immense strides in astronomy, developing the first comprehensive star catalogue and laying the foundations for trigonometry. Furthermore, the pioneering medical research of figures like Herophilus and Erasistratus in Alexandria involved systematic anatomical studies, pushing the boundaries of physiological understanding. Unlike the broader philosophical inquiries that often characterize the classical age, the Hellenistic period frequently saw a more focused emphasis on specialized, technical knowledge and rigorous empirical research, laying essential groundwork for future scientific development. The dramatically changed political landscape, with the decline of the independent polis and the rise of vast kingdoms, also fostered the emergence of new philosophical schools in Athens and elsewhere. These new schools directly addressed the concerns of individuals living in this larger, often overwhelming, new world, seeking personal tranquility and guidance amidst pervasive political instability and a diminished sense of individual civic agency. Stoicism, founded by Zeno of Citium, taught that the path to true happiness lay in virtue, reason, and living in profound harmony with the natural order of the universe, or the divine logos, a pervasive rational principle. Stoics believed one should cultivate inner peace, apatheia, or freedom from passion, by exercising rigorous control over one's emotions and calmly accepting what lay beyond one's control, enduring adversity with resilient tranquility. They emphasized universal brotherhood, seeing all rational beings as part of a single cosmopolis, a global city of humanity, a powerful idea in this age of empires. Imagine a philosopher calmly embracing life's challenges, profoundly believing that true freedom emanates from within, independent of external circumstances. Then there was Epicureanism, founded by Epicurus, which proposed that the ultimate goal of human life was the pursuit of tranquil pleasure. This concept was not understood as sensual indulgence, as is often misunderstood today, but rather as the profound absence of pain, aponia, and mental disturbance or fear, ataraxia. Epicureans advocated for a simple, moderate life, surrounded by cherished friends, shielded from the anxieties of politics and public life, and free from fear of death or the gods, whom they believed did not interfere in human affairs. They embraced an atomic theory of the universe, viewing it as a random collision of atoms, leading them to focus on living well and finding contentment in the here and now, cultivating joy in simple pleasures. In stark contrast, cynicism, exemplified by Diogenes of Sinope, represented a more radical philosophical school. It advocated for a life lived in extreme simplicity, openly rejecting all social conventions, material possessions, and traditional societal values, which they saw as artificial and corrupting. Cynics sought absolute self-sufficiency and profound freedom from external desires, often embracing ascetic lives and defiantly challenging societal hypocrisy through their unconventional behavior. Imagine Diogenes, famously living in a barrel, openly rejecting the norms of his society, embodying a profound commitment to living according to nature. The legacy of the Hellenistic age is truly immense and often overlooked in popular historical narratives. It served as a crucial bridge, meticulously preserving and significantly advancing much of classical Greek knowledge, particularly in the burgeoning sciences and medicine. Furthermore, it successfully spread Greek language and culture, in the form of Koine Greek, across vast swathes of the Near East and Egypt, creating a common cultural lingua franca that would later profoundly facilitate the spread of early Christianity and the wider Roman Empire. This complex period also meticulously laid the intricate political and cultural groundwork for the eventual rise of the Roman Empire, which would in turn inherit and further disseminate this rich Hellenistic synthesis throughout its own vast domain. The era of the independent city-state was undeniably over, its political autonomy a thing of the past, but the indomitable Greek spirit, transformed and expanded, had now become a truly global force, profoundly shaping the very foundations of Western civilization. Chapter 8: Art, Architecture, and Mythology, the Timeless Canvas. Greek architecture, particularly the magnificent temples, stands as a testament to their pursuit of balance, harmony, and idealized proportion. These structures were primarily temples, designed not for congregational worship in the way we understand churches today, but as majestic houses for the cult statue of a particular deity, meant to be viewed and circumambulated from the outside. They were built predominantly from local limestone and, increasingly from the Archaic period onwards, the brilliant white marble that seemed to capture the very light of the Mediterranean sun. The defining characteristic of Greek temple architecture lies in its three principal orders, each possessing a distinct aesthetic and structural vocabulary. First, the Doric order, the earliest and most prevalent, particularly on the mainland and in Magna Graecia. Imagine a powerful, robust column, rising directly from the temple's base without an individual pedestal, its shaft adorned with sharp, vertical flutes. Its capital, the decorative top, is famously simple and austere, consisting of a plain, round cushion-like echinus supporting a square abacus. Above the columns, the frieze is characterized by alternating vertical triglyphs and square metopes, which were often adorned with sculpted reliefs depicting mythological scenes. The Doric order exudes a sense of sturdy, severe beauty, embodying strength, solidity, and a dignified gravity, perfectly exemplified by the colossal Parthenon on the Athenian Acropolis, which, despite its apparent simplicity, incorporates subtle optical refinements to appear perfectly straight and harmonious to the human eye. Next, the Ionic order, which emerged later in the Greek cities of Ionia and on the Aegean islands. Imagine a more slender and elegant column, standing on a more elaborate base. Its defining feature is the distinctive volute or scroll-shaped capital, which coils gracefully outwards like a ram's horn. The Ionic frieze is typically continuous, allowing for a flowing narrative of sculpture rather than segmented panels. This order expresses a sense of grace, lightness, and greater ornamentation, perfectly showcased in the exquisite Erechtheion and the delicate temple of Athena Nike on the Athenian Acropolis. Finally, the Corinthian order, the latest to develop and the most ornate of the three. While rarely used for entire temple exteriors in mainland classical Greece, it gained immense popularity in the later Hellenistic and especially the Roman periods. Imagine a slender column crowned by a tall, richly decorated capital adorned with intricately carved acanthus leaves and small volutes. This order offered the greatest decorative flexibility, embodying a heightened sense of theatricality and elaborate embellishment. Beyond temples, Greek architects also mastered civic structures. The stoa was a long, open colonnaded walkway found in the agora, providing shelter for merchants and a space for public discourse, acting as a vibrant hub of daily life. Gymnasia, originally sites for athletic training, evolved into significant intellectual and social centers. And of course, the theaters, often carved into hillsides, were engineering marvels, famed for their incredible acoustics that allowed thousands to hear the spoken word with clarity, showcasing the communal and civic importance of drama. Greek sculpture underwent a profound evolution, mirroring the changing values and intellectual inquiries of Greek society, moving from rigid, idealized forms to dynamic, emotional realism. The Archaic period, c. 600 to 480 BC, saw the emergence of the first monumental stone sculptures. The primary forms were the kourouros, nude male youth, and the kore, clothed female maiden. Imagine a kourouros figure, stiff, frontal, arms held rigidly at the sides, often with one leg slightly advanced, displaying a stylized, enigmatic archaic smile that did not convey emotion but suggested vitality. These figures, influenced by Egyptian statuary, served as votive offerings to the gods or grave markers, representing an idealized youthful form rather than a specific individual. The kore figures, often richly painted, displayed an emphasis on textile patterns and a graceful, almost static presence. The Classical period, c. 480 to 323 BCE, particularly after the Persian Wars, marked a revolutionary transformation. The early classical or severe style, c. 480 to 450 BCE, served as a vital transition. Imagine sculptures that began to show more naturalistic movement, greater anatomical accuracy, and a subtle seriousness, losing the archaic smile for a more somber, engaged expression. The Critios boy and the magnificent Rias bronzes are prime examples, hinting at the dynamic possibilities of the human form. The High Classical period, c. 450 to 400 BCE, exemplified by the works of masters like Phidias, Polykleitos, and Myron, represented the pinnacle of idealized naturalism. Imagine the perfection of the human body not as a direct copy of reality, but as an idealized synthesis of athletic grace and intellectual poise. The revolutionary innovation of contrapposto became standard, where the figure stands with its weight shifted onto one leg, creating a more dynamic, relaxed, and lifelike pose. Polykleitos's Doriphoros, spearbearer, with its meticulously balanced proportions, embodied his canon, a mathematical treatise on the ideal human form. Myron's Discobolus, discus thrower, captured a moment of athletic tension and grace. Phidias's work on the Parthenon sculptures, with their flowing drapery and lifelike forms, showcased an unparalleled mastery of human anatomy and emotional restraint. The late classical period, c. 400 to 323 BCE, saw a subtle shift towards greater individualism, emotional expression, and a more sensual or graceful ideal. Imagine the works of Praxiteles, who famously sculpted the first fully nude female statue, the Aphrodite of Knidos, introducing a new standard of beauty that was both idealized and more overtly sensual. Figures became less stoic, showing more human emotion and dramatic engagement. Finally, the Hellenistic period, c. 323 to 31 BCE, following Alexander's conquests, brought a dramatic expansion of sculptural themes and styles. Imagine colossal, theatrical, and often intensely emotional works. Sculpture became more diverse, realistic, and often depicted human suffering, old age, individuality, and heightened drama, moving away from the serene idealism of the classical age. The powerful anguish of the Laocoon and his sons, the dynamic movement of the winged victory of Samothrace, or the raw humanity of the dying Gaul illustrate this period's focus on dramatic narrative, heightened emotion, and a broader range of subjects beyond idealized youth and divinity. Greek sculptures, whether in gleaming marble or hollow cast bronze, served as votive offerings, grave markers, public monuments, or awe-inspiring cult statues, reflecting a deep reverence for the human form and the divine. Greek vase painting provides an invaluable window into daily life, mythology, and artistic trends across centuries. These utilitarian objects, used for storing wine or oil, mixing beverages, or as drinking cups, were transformed into canvases for exquisite artistic expression. The earliest significant style was the geometric period, c. 900 to 700 BC, characterized by intricate geometric patterns covering the entire vase, with highly stylized, almost stick-figure human and animal forms used to depict funerary rituals or battle scenes. The Orientalizing period, c. 700 to 600 BC, saw the influence of Eastern motifs, with the introduction of mythical beasts like sphinxes and griffins, rosettes, and floral patterns. The black figure style, c. 600 to 530 BCE, largely dominated by Athenian workshops, became immensely popular. Imagine figures painted in black silhouette against the reddish clay background, with intricate details incised, scratched, into the black paint before firing. Added red and white paint brought further vibrancy. Master painters like Ezekias created iconic works, often depicting mythological narratives or heroic deeds. Around 530 BCE, the revolutionary red figure style emerged. Here, the figures were left in the natural reddish color of the clay, while the background was painted black. This technique allowed for far greater detail and naturalism, as artists could now use a fine brush to draw inner lines, muscles, and drapery, creating a sense of three-dimensionality, dynamic movement, and a more expressive range of poses. This style allowed for greater artistic freedom and naturalism, becoming the dominant form through the classical period. Finally, the rich and complex tapestry of Greek mythology forms the very bedrock of their civilization, permeating every aspect of their art, literature, and thought. These were not simply bedtime stories, but profound narratives that explained their world. The primary sources of these tales were the ancient oral traditions, later formalized in the monumental Homeric epics, the Iliad, recounting the Trojan War and the rage of Achilles, and the Odyssey, detailing Odysseus's perilous journey home. Hesiod's Theogony offered a cosmic genealogy of the gods, while his works and days explored moral precepts and the harsh realities of agricultural life. Later, lyric poets and the great tragedians reimagined and reinterpreted these foundational myths. At the heart of Greek mythology lay a vast and intricate pantheon of anthropomorphic gods and goddesses, who resided on Mount Olympus but constantly intervened in the human world. Imagine Zeus, the king of the gods, ruler of sky and thunder, yet prone to fits of anger and infidelity. His formidable wife, Hera, goddess of marriage, fiercely jealous and often vengeful. Poseidon, the temperamental god of the sea and earthquakes. Hades, the somber ruler of the underworld. Then there were the crucial Olympian deities like Athena, goddess of wisdom, warfare, and crafts, born from Zeus's head, Apollo, god of light, music, prophecy, and healing, his twin sister Artemis, goddess of the hunt and wild nature, Aphrodite, goddess of love and beauty, born from the sea foam, the impulsive Ars, god of war, Hermes, the swift messenger god and trickster, Hephaestus, the lame smith god, Demeter, goddess of the harvest, and Dionysus, god of wine, revelry, and ecstasy. These deities, unlike the omnipotent, perfect gods of monotheistic religions, possessed very human-like qualities and flaws. They loved, hated, schemed, celebrated, and punished, making them relatable yet awe-inspiring figures. Alongside the gods, a rich cast of heroes performed incredible feats, embarked on perilous quests, and grappled with their own fates. Imagine the mighty Heracles, performing his 12 impossible labors, Theseus, navigating the labyrinth to defeat the Minotaur, Perseus, slaying Medusa, Jason, leading the Argonauts in search of the Golden Fleece, and the cunning Odysseus, enduring 10 years of epic struggle to return home. These heroes, often children of gods and mortals, embodied virtues like courage, cunning, and perseverance, but also displayed very human flaws like hubris or arrogance, making their stories cautionary tales as much as celebrations of achievement. Greek mythology served multiple profound purposes and functions. It provided explanations for natural phenomena, e.g., Demeter's grief-causing winter, justified social customs and rituals, explored complex moral dilemmas and the consequences of human actions, and offered a rich tapestry of stories that provided a common cultural identity for all Greeks, transcending the rivalries of individual city-states. It was a flexible, evolving narrative tradition rather than a rigid dogma, allowing for countless reinterpretations and adaptations. Its enduring influence is impossible to overstate, from the very structure of Western narrative to psychological archetypes, e.g., Oedipus complex, Narcissism, to the names of planets and constellations, and countless artistic and literary works across millennia. Greek mythology remains a timeless canvas upon which humanity continues to draw. Chapter 9: Legacy and Enduring Contributions, the Echoes of Greece. Perhaps the most revolutionary and enduring legacy of ancient Greece lies in the realm of democracy and political thought. The Athenian experiment in direct democracy, imperfect as it was by modern standards, excluding women, slaves, and foreigners, was a truly groundbreaking innovation. Imagine a system where eligible citizens directly debated and voted on laws, where public officials were chosen by lot to prevent concentrated power, and where civic duty was seen as the highest calling. This radical notion of rule by the people, of self-governance, laid the foundational blueprint for all subsequent democratic movements. The very concepts of citizen, politics, and tyranny are rooted in Greek thought. The analytical frameworks developed by thinkers like Plato, with his vision of an ideal state, and Aristotle, with his systematic classification and analysis of various constitutions, provided the philosophical bedrock for political science and continue to inform debates about governance and justice to this very day. The idea that individuals could govern themselves, that law should stem from the consent of the governed, was a revolutionary gift to humanity. Flowing directly from their innovative political spirit was the astonishing birth and development of philosophy and rational inquiry. The Greeks initiated the profound shift from mythos, mythological explanation, to logos, rational explanation, daring to ask fundamental questions about the nature of reality, knowledge, ethics, and the human condition, seeking answers through reason rather than divine revelation. Think of the pre-Socratics, grappling with the basic elements of the cosmos, Socrates, tirelessly pursuing moral truth through relentless questioning, Plato, constructing his transcendent theory of forms and his ideal republic, and Aristotle, systematically observing, classifying, and reasoning across every known discipline, laying the foundations for logic and empirical science. This invention of systematic philosophy as a distinct discipline, this relentless pursuit of knowledge for its own sake, forms the very intellectual bedrock of Western thought, inspiring the scientific method, critical thinking, and the relentless quest for understanding that defines modernity. In the realms of arts and architecture, the Greeks bequeathed a legacy of unparalleled beauty and timeless principles. Their architectural orders, the sturdy Doric, the graceful Ionic, and the ornate Corinthian, have served as the fundamental vocabulary of Western architecture for over 2 millennia, influencing everything from Roman temples to Renaissance cathedrals, and from neoclassical government buildings to modern banks. Imagine the enduring forms of columns, pediments, and friezes, adorning structures across every continent. In sculpture, the Greek journey from the stiff, idealized kouroi and korai to the serene idealism of the classical period, with its mastery of contrapposto and idealized human form, and finally to the dramatic realism and emotional intensity of the Hellenistic age, established the very standards of beauty and anatomical representation that would be rediscovered and celebrated during the Renaissance and beyond. Their works continue to define our understanding of idealized human form and dynamic artistic expression. The Greeks also gave us the very structure and purpose of drama. Their invention of tragedy and comedy, performed in vast open-air amphitheaters, provided a powerful civic forum for exploring universal themes of fate, free will, justice, human suffering, and the complexities of morality. The plays of Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides remain timeless masterpieces, dissecting the human condition with profound insight and achieving a cathartic effect that continues to move audiences. Aristophanes' comedies, with their biting satire and social critique, established the enduring tradition of using humor to challenge power and convention. The very concepts of plot, character, chorus, and dramatic structure that underpin modern theater and storytelling originate from these ancient Greek innovators. In literature and history, the Greek contribution is equally monumental. The Homeric epics, the Iliad and the Odyssey, stand as foundational texts of Western literature, shaping our understanding of heroism, adventure, and the human psyche. The emergence of lyric poetry brought forth the individual voice, exploring personal emotion and experience with breathtaking intimacy. Most significantly, the Greeks invented history as a distinct discipline. Herodotus, the father of history, meticulously gathered accounts and observed cultures, while Thucydides, the father of scientific history, rigorously sought factual accuracy, analyzed cause and effect, and dissected political motivations with unparalleled analytical depth. Their works laid the groundwork for objective inquiry into human affairs, emphasizing human agency and the lessons to be learned from the past, rather than simply divine intervention. The power of Greek rhetoric and oratory also set standards for persuasive speech and public debate that continue to influence legal and political discourse. Their impact on science and mathematics was equally profound, despite lacking modern experimental methods. Thales' early attempts to find rational explanations for the cosmos sparked scientific inquiry. The Pythagorean theorem remains a cornerstone of geometry. Euclid's Elements systematized geometry in a way that served as the primary textbook for logical reasoning and mathematics for 2 millennia. Archimedes made groundbreaking discoveries in mechanics and hydrostatics. Eratosthenes accurately calculated the Earth's circumference, and Hipparchus made significant strides in astronomy, mapping constellations and calculating equinoxes. The Greek emphasis on deductive reasoning and theoretical inquiry provided the essential intellectual framework for future scientific revolutions. Even our language bears the undeniable imprint of ancient Greece. Thousands of words in English and other Western languages, particularly in scientific, philosophical, political, and artistic domains, have Greek roots. Terms like democracy, philosophy, theater, physics, geometry, atom, cosmos, logic, rhetoric, academy, and hero are direct linguistic inheritances, silent testaments to the enduring power of Greek thought. The Koine Greek that spread during the Hellenistic period became the common tongue across the Eastern Mediterranean, facilitating communication and the spread of ideas, including early Christianity. Finally, the Greek influence on sports and the Olympic ideal continues to inspire. The Olympic Games, with their emphasis on athletic excellence, fair competition, and the pursuit of physical and mental perfection, arete, served as a powerful symbol of pan-Hellenic unity, fostering peace, at least temporarily, among warring city-states. The modern Olympic Games, revived in the late 19th century, are a direct descendant of this ancient tradition, continuing to embody the spirit of international athletic competition and human striving for excellence. It is crucial to acknowledge, as we have done throughout our journey, that this magnificent civilization was not without its complexities and contradictions. The brilliance of Athens, for example, rested upon a foundation of extensive slavery. Women, despite figures like Sappho, were largely excluded from public life. Warfare between the city-states was endemic and brutal. Yet, it is precisely from this crucible of human imperfection that some of humanity's most profound and revolutionary ideas emerged. Their capacity for self-criticism, their relentless questioning, and their belief in the power of human reason allowed them to innovate in ways that continue to define the very trajectory of Western civilization. The echoes of ancient Greece are not merely faint historical whispers. They are vibrant, living forces in our modern world. They are in the halls of our parliaments, in the logic of our scientific inquiries, in the enduring themes of our literature, in the very forms of our buildings, and in the questions we ask about what it means to live a good life. The legacy of ancient Greece is the legacy of a civilization that dared to ask fundamental questions, that championed human reason, that sought beauty and order, and that, in doing so, laid an indispensable foundation for the world we inhabit today. Their timeless contributions continue to invite our contemplation, reminding us of the enduring power of human ingenuity and the profound, beautiful struggle to understand ourselves and our place in the cosmos.